Mysterious Cryptids, the show that investigates the strange world of cryptids. Welcome to this week's episode of Mysterious Cryptids.
So, hello listener, my name is Rob, and this is Mysterious Cryptids. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you've had a fascinating week and an intriguing week and a wonderful week, and I hope you've enjoyed whatever you've been doing, however you've been spending your time, be it with a loved one or be it being out in the field doing maybe a bit of cryptid research or whatever you've been doing. I hope you've had a good time. I've had quite a good week, actually, to be honest. I've had quite a good week. I've done a bit of research myself this week. We've been up to the Forest of Bowland in the UK, which is a massive like national park kind of thing. It's huge, and it borders. It's a really interesting place because it borders the North Yorkshire Moors and National Parks, and then that borders the Lake Districts, and then from the other side it borders the Kielder Forest, which then goes up into Northumberland and up into Scotland. People are surprised when you just sit down at Google at some point and have a look from like the Forest of Bowland upwards. There is so much wilderness, forest and lakes and mountains, and there's a mountain range in the Forest of Bowland area called the Three Peaks. It's like a whole mountain range. So yeah, it's a lot of people don't realise how much wildlife and how much or how much room for wildlife there is in the UK. Everyone thinks of London, Manchester, Birmingham, and these massive cities. Obviously, they're very, very heavily populated. But when you're out in the sticks, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And this past week, we have been in the middle of nowhere. We've been in the Forest of Bowland. I won't say exactly where. We've done some recording out there for basically big black cat sightings, but also the British wild man. Now this is a fascinating subject for me, because anyone who knows me knows I'm fascinated by Bigfoot and Sasquatch, Yetis, stuff like that. I've always been, since being very, very young. I've always been very fascinated by the idea of these huge ape-like men kind of things. Out of all the cryptids, I love Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call him, the Yeti. I find these animals so fascinating, and I'll call them animals because I think that's what they are. I don't think there's anything paranormal or supernatural going on. I think they're animals. I think they're undiscovered, some kind of ape, and I think that's what they are. I think they're animals. So a lot of people are really interested. Well, interested to learn, I suppose. Interested to find out that that Britain does actually have quite a large, quite a substantial report list of sightings of Bigfoot-like creatures. They're not exactly like Bigfoot. They're a bit smaller. Some people describe them as being like a moss green. So like they've got brown fur on them, but they also have like a almost like a moss green colour to them, if that makes sense. Like they've got moss on them, or kind of like wild growth on them or something. So yeah, it's an interesting area, it's Bowland. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of weird sightings. That's where we've been for the last week. It's been really good to get out. I try and get out as much as I can, but yeah, we've got Cannock Chase in a couple of weeks where we're going to go look down there for actual wild man sightings. These like Bigfoot-like creatures that people claim to see. Obviously, there's also dogmen creatures in the UK that a lot of people claim to see, like werewolf type creature. Whether it is just more cultural or more like folklore, it may be. I don't know. I've never seen these animals. But I know of people who have, and they're very adamant that they've seen them. So they've seen something, and I'm never going to be one that just dismisses it and says, "Oh, it doesn't exist," because it very well could, and I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's important to investigate. It's important to research yourself. So that's what we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks, going in Cannock Chase. But this past week, we've been to Forest of Bowland, and it's been very interesting. I've got loads of footage, load of video. I am going to be polishing it up, maybe publishing it on our Facebook, on our website, and maybe do a YouTube channel for it as well. So we'll link all that on the podcast so you can find it. I'm not the best editor in the world. That's why we get Mike, who is a brilliant editor here at the podcast. He does all the editing for the show. I'm not the best at it. I've not got the patience. I'm not good enough to do it. So I'm all right to say that, you know. I'll just stick to talking for 40 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, and I'll let him do the editing, because that's where the real work is. Because I'm not very good at it. But yeah, I'll polish up this video and I'll share it for you to see. We found a couple of interesting things, you know, a couple of maybes. And then I say a lot of maybes could also add up to a probably. So a lot of maybes, a lot of circumstantial stuff. But yeah, it was an interesting location. Very interesting location. My main purpose for going there was the big black cat sightings. And obviously, because it's got quite a wealth of reports for these like wild men, it made sense to do the investigation for them as well whilst we were there. But we'll be going back again in the future, because it's such a big area. You can't do it in 1 week or a few days. It's such a big area. I mean, it's massive. I can't explain how big it is. And there's nothing there. There's a few houses and farms scattered around, and a couple of villages now and again, but not really much. You can drive for 30 minutes and not see anything, you know. And if you're in the woods or the moorlands area or the forest area, I mean, you can be walking for, I mean, I think at one point I was walking for 3 hours and I didn't see a single person, not a single person. And then I finally saw somebody, and that was like as I crossed the road to get to the other side of the forested area, and I finally saw somebody, but that was only because they were on the road. And when I went back into the forest, you couldn't, honestly, there was no one there. So that's been me for the past week. That's been me. I've been doing a bit of my own research, been working on the website, updating the reports that have been coming in, historical reports and modern reports, because we do have a website. It's cryptidresearch.com. We have like a database up there of sightings and stories. We have a blog up there of some stories. In fact, today's main topic is on there. Because today we're going to be discussing the case of Casey Hathaway. Now, if you've never heard of this case, it's in America. It's a Bigfoot case. It's in North Carolina. And it kind of surrounds the case of basically a 3-year-old boy who survived 2 nights alone in the woods in freezing conditions, has told police and family he was helped out by a friendly bear that was with him the whole time. Now, that's the clipping of the newspaper article. We've actually delved like deeper into it, but that's just like the headline of it. And the whole idea of what happened to young Casey was he was looked after by a big black bear, big friendly black bear, and that's kind of counterintuitive to like what you would expect a bear to do, especially when you go into more the more fine details of what actually happened in his case. And you know, what kind of happened with this case, and the stuff that the young boy claimed had happened. And a lot of people in the Bigfoot field, in the Bigfoot research world, they believe that he got it wrong. It's not a bear, it was a sasquatch that got him. He was abducted by a sasquatch and looked after. Because they obviously do look after their young. They live in family groups. They have, you know, mums and dads, and, you know, they have young as well. They live in family groups. They've been seen in family groups. There's been cases of, like, footprints found where there's a big one and then a slightly smaller one and then a little one. And, you know, there's been many documented cases of this happening. And it's firmly believed that they do live in, like, kind of family units. So I am guessing that they would have seen a young toddler, 3-year-old, and seen him as no threat, an infant, and possibly needing to look after. Because you will see this sometimes in animals. You will see this, especially in apes and stuff. They will sometimes look after. Going back to off the top of my head, is when the little boy that time fell into the animal enclosure. I think the gorilla was called Harambe, and you could see, I mean, unfortunately in that case the gorilla got taken out, he got killed because he was seen as a potential threat to the boy. And whichever side of the argument you fall on, that is up to you. But I think the main point for me to take away from that and link it to this is The gorilla really could have ripped him in two, but he didn't. He was just kind of looking after him. You can go on YouTube and you can kind of search these videos. At any time, the gorilla could have really hurt him, and he didn't want to. He didn't see him as a threat. It was just a young, I suppose to him, what do they call him, cub, or whatever they call him. But it was just young, and you could see he was looking after him. And I think that's what Sasquatches do. And I think in this case, that's what they were doing. They were looking after him. So when the boy claims. So going further on with the newspaper article, rescuers responding to reports of a baby crying found Casey Hathaway tangled up in thorny bushes. Cold and soaked but safe on Thursday night when this happened. He had gone missing on Tuesday, so 2 days, and in conditions so bad that basically the subsequent search had been called off because they didn't think at this point he could survive, and that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense because he's a young boy, he's out in the wild, and the weather wasn't great. So what we have done and what we've done with this, we've kind of researched into it. So all this took place in 2006 when the young boy named Casey Hathaway made headlines when he was found alive after being lost in the woods for 2 days in North Carolina. What made his story even more remarkable was the fact, as mentioned earlier, he got basically kept alive by a friendly bear. Casey had been playing with 2 other children in his grandmother's backyard at the time when he wandered off into the nearby woods, and despite extensive search involving hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement officials, Casey was not found until 2 days later. 2 days later. He's a young boy. 2 days later. He was discovered by a search team in a heavily wooded area, about a mile away or so from his grandmother's house. When Casey was found, he was cold, obviously wet and hungry. It was, not great conditions for him to be out. But remarkably, he was in good health, and, he seemed well. He was taken to a nearby hospital, checked over, treatment and observation, and it was there that he began to tell his story. According to Casey, he had wandered into the woods and become lost. As night fell and the temperatures dropped, he became scared and started to cry. That's when he claimed a bear came to him and kept him warm and safe throughout the night. Casey said that he and the bear cuddled together for warmth, and that the bear even licked his face and kept him clean. While some people are sceptical of Casey's story, there were several factors that seemed to support his claim. For one thing, Casey was found in an area where it had already been searched by people, by the teams, suggesting that he had moved and then been brought back. However, some experts remain sceptical of Casey's story. While it is true that bears have been known to show affection towards humans in certain situations, it is highly unusual for a bear to be so friendly towards a child. Moreover, there is no real physical signs that Casey had ever been in contact with a bear, such as scratches or bite marks. In the end, the truth behind Casey Hathaway's story may never be known for certain, while some believe he was indeed kept alive by a friendly bear. Now I want to stop that kind of part there. So we've written this, and we're trying to write it in a way that, and present the case in a way of, this is what the official, declaration is, that, that he was somehow lost and a bear found him and a bear looked after him, but yet there was no physical signs of this bear ever being there, and there was no physical signs of a bear, really looking after him, bite marks, claw marks, nothing like that. Now, anybody who knows anything about bears, and I'm not from America, I'm from the UK, so I had to look into bear behaviour and stuff. It's highly unusual. I mean, it's highly unusual. For a want of a better way to describe it, the bear would more likely just attack him or leave him alone altogether. It would either attack him or leave him alone. It would either see him as threat, food, or you just couldn't be bothered with him. So it's very unlikely to me. I can't see it being a bear. I can't, and just when you go into the details a bit more, and you go into the actual report of this case, because it was all documented, it was all reported properly. You can get all the reports online, which is what we've done for this. You can kind of build up a bit more of a picture. Now, obviously, you have to take the boy's age into account. You have to. I have to acknowledge that. He's young. He's not young enough. I don't think he's old enough to make up this kind of I don't think he's old enough to make it up. I don't think he's old enough to make it up. And he's young. He's quite innocent. He'll be quite innocent in his way of thinking. He's not going to be thinking to himself, right, I've got myself lost. When I get found, I need to come up with this fantastical story. I just can't see that. You know, he's old enough to understand what's going on. He's old enough to take part of it and take it all in and tell you what happened. If you ask a 3-year-old, oh, how did you fall over? Or how did you trip? Or, you know, whatever. How did you hurt yourself? They can relay you the story of what happened. I don't know many 3-4-year-olds that can lie to you. I don't know many that can come up with such a fantastical story of this bear looking after him. And I may add also, in some of the reports, the bear brought him food or berries, should I say, and the bear, you know, looked after him and made sure he had water and stuff like that. And to me, I mean, you know, maybe some of these reports, I get sometimes things can be embellished, or the story can be not twisted as such, but it can change over time, a bit like Chinese whispers. But from what I've read, this thing looked after him. Now, you can probably guess where I'm going with this, especially by the title of the podcast, but I don't think, and after reading online, after looking into it, reading many articles, and reading the actual, like, police report, the hospital report, the report from the reporters and stuff like that, reading newspaper articles, going into it, actually reading up on it, I don't think it was a bear. I don't think it was a bear at all. I am firmly in the camp of believing that this was a Sasquatch, or maybe a group of Sasquatches. I am firmly in that group. I believe that that's what this was. And it's not the only case of its kind to have something like this. You know, there has been other incidents where people have claimed to have been abducted by Bigfoot, or, you know, pursued by Bigfoot, or looked after by Bigfoot. I'm not going to go into them today because, as you know, I wanted to keep on topic for this podcast. But in the case of Casey Hathaway, I genuinely believe he's just relaying his understanding of what happened. And I suppose when you're that young, what does a Sasquatch look like? I suppose it kind of looks like a bear. You know, to somebody that young, it kind of looks like a bear, because I doubt he's seen many bears, but he'll know that they exist, and he'll know that they're there. And I'm guessing Sasquatch and stuff like that, although they do exist, I'm guessing that he'll be more familiar with a bear. So he's gone to something that he's familiar with, and he's trying to fill in the gaps. But I think at the core of it, the very core of this, he's relaying what's happened to him. He's relaying to you what's happened to him, and I think that is all you can really do with this. Is, I think all he's really done is relayed his story. He's relayed his story, and he's going to fill in the gaps, or the bits that he's not uncertain about, or the bits that he doesn't understand. And he's filling him in with what he knows, which is, it makes sense. It makes sense. And it's firmly believed within the Bigfoot community that, I think, for a lot of Bigfooters, not all of them, I think a lot of them would probably suggest it could have been a Sasquatch at least. I personally believe that it was. I absolutely believe it was. I don't think a bear, black bear, brown, and definitely not brown bear, but a black bear would have looked after him. I don't think it would have done. I don't think it would have done. I don't think it would have looked after him in the slightest. I don't think it. I think if anything, it would have left it. It would have left him, and that was it. And I certainly don't think it would have looked after him. I don't think it would have had any reason to. And I do think it's a Sasquatch. I really do. I think it is definitely a Sasquatch. So in the case of Casey Hathaway, I definitely think, for me, I am definitely in that camp of it was a Sasquatch. Because there has been many of reports and documents, you know, I'm Ape Canyon, for instance, you know, the three or four prospectors that, you know, they were in this canyon, and basically they had an encounter with these Sasquatch, and they spent the whole night being hounded and battered, if you like, you know, just battered. Like the log cabin that they were in was nearly destroyed because of these, you know, Sasquatches. And it's not the first time stories like this have popped up, and it's certainly not the first time an encounter of somebody either being abducted or looked after or has come into like close encounter with a Sasquatch. I think because people are so used to hearing stories like, oh, it was a blur, it just ran through the forest, or oh, it was a road sighting, it was just stood on the side of a road, or oh, it was just crossing the road and I just caught it at a glimpse. And I think because so many of the reports are like that when we hear something like this, we have to, I suppose like young Casey was doing, we have to fill it in with something that we're familiar with. So we for a lot of people, is it a Bigfoot that's abducted him or looked after him, should I say, or is it a bear? People tend to lean more towards a bear because, I don't know, maybe they feel more comfortable with that. I don't really know. But personally, I'm firmly in the camp that this was a Sasquatch, and I think it looked after him, because I do think they look after their young. I think they live in groups. I think they live in family groups, and I think they look after their young. And I possibly even would go as far to say it was probably a female. I think it was probably a female Sasquatch that looked after him. I don't know why. I just feel like the males are more stereotypical male role, you know, hunter gatherer, that kind of thing, and I think the females would be more caring and nurturing. I think especially in the wild, they have like these nursery areas where they put their young. I think the female Sasquatches do that side of it. They kind of do that nurturing side, and I think a female Sasquatch is well within the for me, possibility of what actually happened here for young Casey. And it's incredibly lucky that the fact that he survived. He survived 2 days. And anyone who's been out in the woods, lost, I've been lost in the woods before. It's not nice. And I go out a lot. I go out in the woods a lot. And I spend a lot of my time, spare time, in the woods and going outside and stuff. And I've been lost. God, loads of times I've been lost. I mean, I've ended up getting myself turned around and not realised where I am. But I'm a grown man. He was a young boy. And I think it's too extraordinary to believe that it was a bear. I think the bear would have... I think the bear would have hurt him or just left him. And I think that would have been the end of it. So today's topic has been on Casey Hathaway and the boy that was possibly abducted or looked after by a Bigfoot. Now, obviously, Bigfoot is one of the big cryptids, and here at Mysterious Cryptids, we are going to be covering a plethora of, cryptids, but Bigfoot for me is one of the big ones, so we will be covering him quite a bit. But we'll also be covering other cryptid, dogmen and big cat sightings. I've just finished a podcast script for the Black Shuck. Now, if you've never heard of that, if you're new to that, it's kind of like a black, shady demon dog kind of thing. It's the best way I could describe it, but it's firmly within the realm of like cryptozoology and kind of like tap dances over the line to paranormal. But I do think that there's possibly some links to historical like sightings of wolves and stuff like that back in the day, and I think it's probably more folklore, but it's interesting around it anyway. It's the whole stories and the sightings and stuff are interesting. And could it possibly be a case of it wasn't a dog, it was a cat, and you saw a big black cat, which I would always argue that big black cats in the UK definitely exist. I've seen them. I know we touched on this in last week's podcast. They do exist. I've seen them. I know they're here. I've seen them. So anyway, yeah, so today's topic has been on Bigfoot and the case of Casey Hathaway. If you've never ever actually heard this before, I do encourage you, I really encourage you, go read up on it. You know, you're going to get your newspaper articles which are a bit free and loose with what they're kind of saying, and they've not, it's newspaper journalism, you know, they kind of wrote it in 20 minutes. It's not going to be the best place for your source of information, but there's lots of articles. There's a proper police reports that you can get out there and stuff like that, so you can, or bits of them anyway. So I would definitely recommend go watch a video, go watch a documentary on it, go learn a bit about it, and then make your own decision. But I just know from what I know and what I believe, and I don't believe this was a bear. Absolutely don't believe. So he's either lying and none of this happened, or it was a Bigfoot. And that's as clear cut as I am on this. He's either lying, which I don't see somebody so young coming up with such a fantastic story. I can't see it. I've got children, and I remember when they were 3, 4, 5 year old, and they could, no, there's no way they could have come up with such a fantastic story. Kids have great imaginations, they do, but they're not the best at convincing you to a lie. They're not. You can kind of tell when a child's lying, and they kind of step away from what they're saying. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like the story will start off in a way, and then it will tail off somewhere, and it will go over here, and it will go over there, and it will change over time. This has never changed. It's always been this happened, then this happened, then I was found. And I just think he's relaying his story, and that's what he's doing. But yeah, I would encourage you to go and go read up on this, go study it yourself. We don't have much time left for this episode. I am working on getting some guests on the show very soon. I will be talking over topics, other cases as well. Maybe perhaps ones you've not heard. I hope maybe you've not heard this case before. If you have, then hopefully you still enjoyed the podcast. But I'm going to be doing more like this. We're going to have some witnesses on and some interviewees on, and hopefully down the line, you know, because we're still very early doors with this podcast thing. We're still very early doors. Hopefully down the line, maybe we can get some specialists on or some experts on, and then that would be brilliant too. So, but we've got big plans for the show. It's a long-term project. We've got big plans for it, but we are very, very early doors at the moment. So, if you want to email the show, or email me direct, you can email me. My email is info@robbray.net. You can visit our website, cryptidresearch.com. We've also got a couple of Facebook presences as well. You can go and have a look for the Cryptozoology Research Organisation. And you can also go and look for... we've also got Mysterious Cryptids over on YouTube. We haven't actually got all on there yet, but I have been recording some bits I'm going to put up there. More like a place you can just put stuff we find, document and stuff. And then obviously we've got the podcast. So if you do like the podcast, like, subscribe, share, pass it on, share it with your friends, help us grow this community, and this fantastic community, help us grow it, and just carry on the way we are. You can also drop us a message through the website, or there's also, before I go, I wanted to mention this, there's also our fantastic database that we're currently building on our website. It basically has historical events or historical witness events of mysterious beasts, be it sea serpents or giant eels, or black cat sightings or wild men sightings. And we're building it out at the moment. It's still in its early days, but there's quite a lot of documented sightings on there already. It is open source kind of thing, so you can add to it. It's more like it is a bit like a forum, so you can add to it. Obviously all the posts are pre-approved. You got to you put it in, submit it, we approve it, because you don't want anyone being silly and putting things on there. But if you wanted to get involved with that, if you wanted to submit your I don't know if you had a sighting or your expertise, you can send us a message through the website. It all comes through to us. Or you can email me direct at info@robbray.net. Right, that is just about it for me and this podcast. I would like to say a massive thank you for listening. Thank you for spending your morning or afternoon commute with us. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I shall see you in the next one, where we'll do another cryptid, we'll do another topic, and have a fantastic week. I shall see you next time. Bye for now.
Why not advertise with us? Email thebcro@yahoo.com. That's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week.